So we were able to go in a cafe, and that's people from our group in this cafe were.
Of several groups, actually, everybody was getting in from the rain, and you go into a cafe, and you have your coffee, and you have a little snack, and it's like,
We
okay.
were with the Grand Circle tour group, people at the table next to us sat down, they were from the biking tour group, and it was just full of people on tours downtown. But it was a welcome break from the rain. And that's part of one of the universities near the Sorbonne in the Latin Quarter. That is, after the walking tour there ended, you could go up to the Pantheon, and you see how wet it is still up there, which was built as a church for St. Elizabeth, I think, am I remembering right? St. Margaret or St. Elizabeth, one or the other. But then it was during the Revolution, so by the time they finished it, the state was banning churches and not having churches. So they made it a pantheon like they have in Greece, except the one in Greece is devoted to 10 different gods or whatever. If you've ever been there, it's in the round, and there's gods everywhere. And on this one, on one set of walls, there's all the stories of the saint, because it was going to be her church in paintings. And on the other walls, then there's pictures of things related to the Revolution. It's famous mostly, though, for what's downstairs, which you'll see in a minute, which is a crypt, and basically everybody famous in France has been buried there. So that's inside the dome there with some of the groups.
That's what the church would have looked like if it had ever been a church, well, after it was no longer.
That would probably have been the altar up there if it had ever become a church, but it never did. But you see how beautifully painted it is. And then that's one of the rooms in the crypt. It's just a long hallway with rooms like this on both sides. And I thought I'd be able to read this line, so zoom in on it. John somebody, no, sorry, don't know who it is, but there's, at any rate, all the presidents, the figures of the Republic, the great poets, Victor Hugo, who wrote Les Mis, people like that are all buried there. So we walked up there after walking for an hour and a half already in the rain. That was optional to the top of the hill. Then we decided we would go down to Sainte-Chapelle because we wanted to see that if we could. The lines were ridiculously long, even for people who already had tickets. So we walked back down to the Ile-de-France. Now we decided, well, we'll just walk instead of taking the subway to the Rodin Museum. So that's Le Penseur, the thinker, the original of which is there in the Rodin Museum. It was a very long walk. It was like a 40-minute walk, but it had stopped raining by then, at least. And that's one of his famous sculptures, which you might know the story. It's called the Burghers of Calais, the kind of city council of this town that was at war. They were French in Normandy, but the English were invading back and forth when they were fighting for Normandy. And they were told, you better surrender 3 times, and they didn't, because they thought the French king was coming, and then finally they realized he didn't, and they said, okay, but you didn't surrender when they told you to. We want your city leaders out dressed like this in chains or with a noose around their neck, ready to be executed. Then the story is that Catherine of Aquitaine, I guess it was, or Aragon, southern part of France, was the wife of the king and prevailed on him not to execute them. Other people say, nah, he just made him do this, he never intended to execute him, it's just part of the legend that it would have been executed. But each of those figures, there's a separate casting of them that he did earlier, and then you'll see in a minute one of them that was done. He did the whole thing in marble before he did it in bronze. So when you go to the inside of the museum, you see many, many, many marble, either studies or, like for each of them, there's a separate casting in bronze outside. For most of them, there's a separate figure. The guy who's kind of twisted here is the one at the front they're trying to work with. And he was also known for doing sculptures of his friends, also in marble and then in bronze. I think we got it. But there should be
Don't do
one
the
more.
important things.
Oh, I thought I had a picture of that, but this is
You eat any of those?
All kinds
what's
of
the shop in
pictures.
Lexington that does this? That's Le Petit in downtown Lexington makes macarons, and
Yes, we had.
daughter loves them and buys them often. This is
The ship had some.
This is the French version.
Too.
the
Oh, yes.
French store
This
version
is the
of it.
real version.
And now we've left Paris, we're going down to Lyon. And I don't think we had a picture of the high-speed train. This is one of those trains that they say goes 200 miles an hour or so. Because in France, you could take a plane from one place to another, but with security and all that, it'll take about twice as long as taking a train almost anywhere.
And they've just started eliminating short flights anyway, totally, so
Yeah.
they're forcing you to
So
take
the
the trains,
train,
which is good.
the train is really what it's all about, and you go there, and especially the ones in Paris, you know, they're 10 tracks wide to find your track and get your train. But they're very, very much on time. You know, every car is numbered, every seat in every car is numbered. You know exactly where you're going to sit, and it was very, very nice. So this is Lyon, and when you come from the river where we were staying to come to downtown, you catch first the old downtown. We're crossing. There's a little island, and then you cross to the old city, and that's the back of the cathedral. I think you'll see the front in a minute. And then way up the hill, it's another 300 feet or whatever high. It's an older place with a cathedral that's technically, I think, newer, but that was the first settlement of the city, was all the way up the top of the hill.
It's just a typical street.
Kind of a street view there. They were built before there were cars in both directions, and now all the tourist areas, all the downtowns are all pedestrian, things like that. So you'll see restaurants and shops right and left. And this is a little out of sequence because we go back to another picture of this place. This is a place that does screen printing and also in the old-fashioned way, it does silk fabrics and weavings. Like for very, very fancy things, they get gold and silver threads into threads for religious ceremonies or royalty or whatever. This is a guy doing hand painting some silk screen. And the other pictures will come back to in just a minute. That's the river between, the bridge between where we're staying, the real river, and the old city. So the newer part of the city's on an island to the right. That's the old city to the left. The market is on the right. Here's a picture of our boat. It's an older boat than most of the other ones there. It's not all fancy glitter and everything like the Viking one is. The front part you see with the big curved windows, that's the lounge, so bar area or wherever there were meetings with speakers or things like that. And our room would have been probably the third or fourth window back, but I think we were on the other side. So we were on the
Yeah, well, we were downstairs. We were.
down. Yeah, if you look on the
We were in
level
the
where it
base-
says River Chanson, then there are rooms down there.
We
The
were in
length
the
of the
cheap
boat.
seats.
Yeah, portal.
That's what was left
We had,
when we booked.
we had 2 portholes.
Yeah, 2 portals instead of the window.
But you
This-
got to see that, the water life, you know.
Hey,
With
yes,
swans and things like that,
swans,
yeah. And the truth is, we just never spend a lot of time in our room.
And then fish.
On the boat moving, we want to be on the sun deck. If there's something to see, you see they
Yeah.
have a huge sun deck up there. And not a pool on this one. And then at the back is the restaurant. But some in the middle, there are rooms at that level too. But it's low so they can go under the bridges
Yeah,
like you
right.
see back there. Anything taller than that, you can't go under. That one, the one we went on in the Seine when we went to Normandy, actually that cabin in the middle of the wheelhouse actually dropped down 4 feet
Yeah.
into the rest of the ship so they could go into Paris
Well,
proper.
and actually, see those shade things on the boat, they had to take those down when they went under the sun.
To go under the low
And
bridges,
they could not
especially
go
in
under
Paris.
the bridges. with
Without
those
looking.
up. Yeah.
They take those down and they lie flat. And you can't go up on the upper deck when you're going through places like that. Now this is the guy Jacquard who invented the form of weaving, like in the 1700s, where you can go in different directions other than just this way and that way. And like probably never saw it, so I saw soccer uniforms. If you picture soccer uniforms that have squares in them and one side looks shiny or it's on a
Oh, yeah.
diagonal. He invented that method. And the loom, which I think you'll see in the picture.
No, that's
You
just,
see-
that's not the loom. Well, the loom is behind it, is that
Right,
the
that's
wood
the
behind it.
feed, the bobbins, if you wanna call them that or whatever.
Right, right.
And that one, I think you can see some of the threads are really gold, but they do some very, very fancy, expensive stuff, and all of it's expensive because they're doing it the way it was done in
long
the
time ago.
17th century.
Right.
And at the time, that was Lyon's claim to fame. They had like 60,000 textile workers doing this silk stuff with silk that came from Asia, and they would be the ones working it. But I think they're the last ones that do it the old-fashioned way. This is when you're up at the old city, Newark Cathedral, looking down, you see some skyscrapers in the background from the new real city. Straight across the river from there is the market we were at there. But you see kind of the way towns are down there, it's mostly those orange tile roofs, because you're getting into
The
very
old
warm,
tunnels, okay.
warm areas there.
This is that next little town, Jay.
It is, it is. Yep, I've got them in the wrong order. This is a view from the dock area up to a town called Viviers, V-I-V-E-R-S, which is nothing famous or anything, it's just an area that wasn't disturbed in any of the wars. So you have a basic medieval walled city with a church or cathedral at the top. Had that sign there to remind me that that's what that was, Viviers. And there's a restaurant telling you what the specials of the day are.
Do you speak French?
He does.
Yeah, a little
You do?
bit.
Oh, okay.
I can read a tiny bit of it, but he's really good at it.
Well, not very good, but I learned French because where I went to school in Massachusetts, there were a lot of Quebecois people
Oh,
from
yeah.
Quebec. So if you wanted a language in seventh grade, it had to be French. You didn't have a choice. In high school, you might have Spanish or German, but.
Yeah,
so,
I was from Lily County and we only had French, and I'm like, where am I gonna do that?
Yeah, really.
You need to teach us some English.
Well, if you can remember a song,
You're supposed to have that too.
We'll show you a famous bridge in it that has to do with the French language. But at any rate, it's beef, veal, lamb, pork. Voyer is one of their local dishes where it's all kind of mixed in. And that's walking up the streets. That's actually, I guess, a side view of the square of
That's in that
town.
little town, yeah.
Viviers. That's our guide on the right. It's another view.
And people still live there, all those houses are inhabited, but they drive someplace else to work.
So you see, that was a stone building, and then they stuccoed it, and now the stucco's gone. And we saw actually two of them being renovated on the inside that were super contemporary, but they have to keep, because it's a historic site and all that, they have to keep the shape of the outside the way it
Historic
was.
register here. Ooh.
Now we're in Avignon, and the Ferris wheel is just a way of reminding me, oh, that's Avignon, because that was the one we saw. And that was another place that's now, it wasn't that touristy, it's now hugely touristy, largely because of the river cruises. They just have a long row of docks. The Viking ones booked 2 or 3 across. Somebody else was booked beside us. If somebody's parked beside you, it means they walk through your foyer of the ship or whatever to get to each other. So you get
Wow.
to see other people's ships and see what they're into.
Did y'all ride the Ferris wheel?
No.
We did not.
And it was very windy
It was
down
very
there,
windy.
so, yeah. They have what's called a mistral, which is just a hard wind, and it comes every year at the same time, M-I-S-T-R-A-L, I think it is.
Mistral.
Mistral, and it will blow you away. And that thing was spinning without being turned.
Oh, my. It's like you might never get off.
You might not get off when you intended.
Actually, I put that up, that's not there all the time, they had put it up there's a big, festival that comes every year, which was coming up within the next week or so.
Theater festival, and all the theaters have like 6 shows a day that are full, and all the public squares have theaters. Basically, you can't get in, and that would have been the week after we were there.
Yeah, nice.
This
And I
is
was
one of
glad
the-
not to be there when all those people were there, cause it would be a mess.
And this is one of the striking views as you come down the river, you see this, and this would be on the west side of the river, which at the time Avignon became famous. The west side of the river would have been France, and that was the King of France's castle on the west side of the river. But on the east side of the river, the popes had kind of been run out of Rome at that time for not paying their troops. There was a famous thing called the sack of Rome in 1380 or whatever it was. But the Pope had hired a bunch of German mercenary troops who defeated the Italian troops, and then he didn't pay them. So they just took it in kind. They just went in churches and stole the gold and stuff like that.
You'd think the Pope would be trustworthy, but you know.
Really, they thought.
Back in
So the
those
popes
days.
escaped to
Believe you're
Avignon.
naive.
So that's the west side,
I mean, it
because
would work for him.
the King of France didn't trust the popes. The next building is, they say, the biggest Gothic building in the world. That is the Palace of the Popes, which goes on for a little distance still to the left. And there's an extension on the right that they consider modern.
A church with
Because it's 15th century.
Oh, yeah.
So there were, I think, a grand total of 5 popes, or maybe 6.
Yeah.
And 3 or 4 of them were legitimate. They were from Rome. They didn't want to go back to Rome. They kept it here for a while. And then Rome had a rival pope. So for 2 of their popes, there was a rival pope. And finally, they decided maybe we should unify. The Roman Pope wanted to unify. And the King of France said, it's time. You know, in so many words, I'm kicking you out. And they said, okay. And then the popes went back in like 1420 or something like that. Did you learn a song, Donna, when you studied French?
Frère Jacques. Sur
Frère
le
Jacques.
pont d'Avignon.
Sur le pont d'Avignon, there is the Pont d'Avignon. It was a Roman bridge, and they kept it up until like the 12th or 13th century. The French kept it up, but this particular stretch of the river is just too strong. So it kept knocking down the west end of the bridge. That's what's left of the Pont d'Avignon, where people dance, according to the French song, right?
Yeah, the story is about they wanted to build a bridge across the river, and they didn't have the technical ability at that time to do it. So the story is a little boy got word from God of how to do it, and he told them how to build this bridge. So that's the bridge, and he was supposedly buried in the little chapel there that's on the bridge.
So who did
And
the
so
tour of the bridge?
there's
Well,
a song that kids learn, which I didn't know, what that she was singing. And it tells you to dance on the bridge. So what you're supposed to do as a tourist is you're supposed to go and dance on the bridge in memory of this little boy.
And the legend of the boy was he went to the Pope and said, we've got to do this. And the Pope said, well, if you know that much, then you'll know how to move this rock from here to there, and that would be the base of the bridge, which no one could do. And the boy used this method or whatever and did move the rock, and the Pope kept his word, built the bridge. But over the years, it just kept breaking down the other side and they gave up. So now it's a historic structure, but not really a
But does
bridge.
it go across?
No.
It does not go across.
Interesting.
That's another view across the river of the King of France's from the chateau and the castle on the Pope's side. That's our level of the boat, looking down at the rooms. I think that's probably back to the engine room before that far door. But it's very old style boat that we were on. Now this is a whole different story, and we almost didn't go on this trip, but there's usually two side trips you can choose from, and one was a famous Roman aqueduct, but we'd seen one in Spain, so we didn't go. This was to a bull farm. You think a bull farm? What's a bull farm? This is outside the town of Arles, A-R-L-E-S, in an area called the Camargue, and they're famous for their bullfighting. So this is the bull farm where they raise the bulls. But to raise the bulls, you need the horses, because the horses end up being the ones with these riders who cut the bull out to say, oh, this bull or these bulls have to go to this town that day. They round them up with these horses who are a special breed, and they're white. And apparently in Spain they use a special breed, and in Italy, but they're black. But supposedly these initially came from Italy. Tell them about the family soon.
You don't know which one.
Those three back there,
Okay,
there's
cool.
actually another one, there's four, and the way they greeted us is they came riding out, it looked like Bonanza, you know how Bonanza started? They came riding out and stopped right next to where we were on this little cart kind of thing. But the grandma and grandpa are both in their 80s, and they're still doing this. Still
They were
doing
two
this.
of the people rounding them up.
And these are the bulls, yeah.
Now, here are their bulls, also a special breed. They might be a little lighter than the bulls that the Spaniards use, and the Spaniards kill the bulls. But the Spaniards do not fight bills like this, because the bulls would probably kill the Spaniards with the horns like that. The Spaniards do their horses with the curbs going down, so that the toreador can let them go by without being hit. This is a very different form of bullfighting they do. They go in a ring with the bull and 10 men for 15 minutes. And the bull has, I don't think you can see it, one of them still had one of the caps on his horn, has ribbons on each horn and a ribbon in the middle, and the object is get the ribbons. So you've won a prize if you won the ribbons. If none of the 10 men can get all of the ribbons in 15 minutes, then the bull wins. But either way, the bull lives. So the bull is never killed in the Cour de Camargue, they call it Camargue, where bull fights.
Yeah, what does the bull win?
Well, the bull.
They don't get to die.
The bull that
Well, he
had
didn't get to
never,
die anyway.
there was one bull that this family had that had never, during the whole course of its life in the bull ring, nobody had ever taken the ribbon off its horn.
In seven
So when
years
it
in
died, they buried it and put a monument up.
I did that for my cat, and it didn't do nothing.
And the
You're just
family that does
special,
this, as
Donna.
you said, the parents who used to own it or do own it, then the current generation owns it. And the current generation, the guy's into salads. So in this building where they give you some food or whatever, there's saddles from China, saddles from Egypt, saddles from everywhere. I forget what this one
It's
is.
kind of like over there in that part of the country, it's kind of like baseball or soccer or something.
It's
like
their
a-
thing.
It's a thing, and these people have traveled over the United States in rodeos. They put on exhibitions here.
Bringing their bulls.
The farm. It's not a huge. I mean, it's huge in space. It's not like elaborate or anything. But they had a write up in the New York Times about.
Look at that. Did y'all go watch one?
No,
We did, they showed us videos. We didn't watch it. There wasn't one while we were there. I'll show you the film.
Would you have gone?
To watch it.
I
no,
would have
probably
gone.
not.
I would have gone. They
Jay's
still-
like, I would have. Sue's like, I wouldn't have.
Well, Jay won't tell you well. Jay's actually done this before.
Jay.
Yeah, they think nobody in the U.S. knows this kind of rodeo. When I was at Auburn, every year there was and Auburn is called a cow college, right? University
Yes.
of Alabama, so academic
got the
Auburn's
veterinary school, so-
agriculture
Right, yeah.
and engineering. It was a thing the fraternities did as a fundraiser.
Of course it
Oh,
was.
someone will ride a horse
You
bareback
idiots.
and try to go 7
Not the
seconds.
sorority.
Someone will ride a
Not the
bull.
sorority.
One member from each fraternity would go in and try to get the ribbons from the bull's horn. I might have got one from the tip. I never went from the other one. As I told Sue, I was a freshman. Next year, a freshman had to do it. And he tried to run head on to the bull, and he did. He spent 2 days in the infirmary with a concussion. But he wanted to get the one from the middle, and he just literally ran into the bull. The pictures they show you, when the bull is really in charge and gets angry, the bull literally knocks down the red wall. They're trying to get their butts up into the Coliseum. That guy may be jumping or he may have been thrown. We saw videos where the bull is throwing them out of the ring like that.
Like, does people die doing this?
They can. Their son is gonna do it. Well, or do they say he?
The way they sell it to the Americans is to say, no bulls are hurt in this. You know,
Well, it looks to me
'cause
like the bull is probably
in the
hurt when
bull
you see him
fight, the
crashing
bull
through
is
the wall.
killed, you know, but in this, but then they get to go home and they get to leave out in the field and they get to be.
But the videos they showed us, the bull literally just crashes. The wall falls, and they're throwing these guys up into, and the guys are trying to jump up there to be safe. So they don't seem to have rodeo clowns. The advantage we had as amateurs and doing this as fraternity guys was they had the real rodeo clowns there. So if the bull went after you, the clown went after the bull and distracted them, whatever. Nobody got hurt. The rodeo we
But the
did.
way they got the bulls out is
Unless they charge the bull.
they have these
Yeah.
bulls that are no good at this, but for some reason, they're really good at getting other bulls out. So they always take these bulls who are like, I don't know,
Like
companions or something, and they'll send him, if they can't get the bull out, if he's still all torn up, they'll send a different bull in and say, get your buddy.
It's
And
just
so
like the
they just-
outriders at the end of a horse race.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the horses are all frothy and wanting to run or whatever, and the outriders come up with a different horse. and calm them down.
Right?
That's restaurants on the square. Yeah, I wish we'd had a picture of the place where we ate. If you have a reservation, you get to eat outside. If you don't, you have to go in the restaurant. It's
Here's
the
the
outdoors in this
Everybody
season,
eats outside.
in this season, the
Everybody wants to go
outdoors
outside.
is most desirable.
So weather was good, like not too hot.
A couple of days it was hot, but when the Mistral comes, it comes down from the Alps. There's a lake in the Alps that feeds the Rhone. And then the cold wind just comes, and it comes for anywhere from like 2 to 9 days. So I think we had 1 or 2 hot days, and then the rest of the time we were on the river, it was in the Mistral. Now in Nice, which we'll show you in a minute, it's hot again. That's the Roman Forum, so from Roman times at Arles, and they still use it for shows. You can see in the back, they're renovating, or through the doors there, they're renovating it to put more seating in, and then the bullfights still go on there. And that's kind of looking through, you can see how deep the Coliseum is. All the seats are above that tunnel. The seats. That's a church downtown. I forget why I took this picture. It's like 14th century. There's, the older ones are 14th century, the newer ones are 17th century. But that's right in the square. Now this is, and I think you'll see the tree, maybe you'll know it. This is a very famous place in Arles, not because of anything in Arles culture, but because of Vincent van Gogh. This is, was in that day a hospital. So this is the courtyard of a hospital. I think the next picture is a tree. And Van Gogh painted that scene. You might see the painting of that tree when he stayed there after he cut off his ear. And they decided you need to be in a hospital. And he was really in a mental ward there. But I had thought that was up along the Senate. It was not. It was down here where he cut off his ear and turned up. had it sent to one of his lover prostitutes or whoever it was. And got it there, but they're really into
He
Van
really
Gogh
was
there.
crazy.
I'll show you some Van Gogh things in a minute. From there, another day trip. And I don't know what an Atelier des Lumières is. I just know there's 6 of them in Europe, and this was amazing. And what they said, this is another side trip you pay a little more for. And they said, well, it's a quarry, but they light it up with these video presentations.
Limestone.
Except don't come if you have vertigo, because it's also on the ceiling everywhere, and you just get totally disoriented, which is true. But it was mostly Dutch masters, Vermeer, Van Gogh, up to, what's his name, Piet Mondrian. So this is, you're walking through, there's 3 different images. There's an image on the ceiling, although at the moment there isn't one there. There's one at the wall you're just looking straight at. There's other ones on the left and right. These are all Van Goghs.
But what you have to know is that there's a whole cavern of places where they've taken out all the limestone and the walls are just sheer, and they put these pictures all over everything. So you just walk around and they're playing music at the same time.
So if you picture coal mines, they usually leave a
Yeah,
slab
it's
in the middle,
amazing.
slab in the middle and say it's a roof support and go around the mine behind it. That's what they're doing. There's 3 of these things where you're looking at a far wall, but there's columns in the middle that are, you know, much bigger than any building that they left there to support the roof. And some of this was limestone, some was something else. That's they're projecting to a place called the Yellow House, which is where Van Gogh lived when he was in Arles, famous painting. And that has the Starry Night theme going on every wall at once
Go through it.
from Van Gogh. And that's a Vermeer. Pictures of Dutch classical people.
And that's the outside of it. And so you go through that little hole there into the mountain.
Yeah, to the right of the van there. That you follow that way up to the entrance. Now you get an aerial view of there, because across from it is a city that's, again, for no particular reason, not really famous, maybe for one thing. It's called Les Baux, B-A-U-X, because it's another thing, wasn't strategic, no one ever bombed it in all the wars. But Beau, B-A-U-X, you might know what metal they found there in mind before Jamaica and all the Caribbean islands. Now it's where you get bauxite to make aluminum. But it was in Les Baux and they named it Box, B-A-U-X. So bauxite is the metal there. And you come in through a wall and then you walk up to the top. So this is, as you walk up, shops on the right, a restaurant there, Gourmand place. Then as you go up to the top, you have the view looking down the valley. Oh, the other way, to your right would have been where the quarry was, and to your left you're looking down the valley. There's a church on top there that's just a very old-fashioned church. Like this would have maybe been 12th or 13th century. But even then you could see they had neat glass, neat designs. This building is the Museum of Modern Art there, which is very controversial, as you might imagine. So it's 6 stories or whatever it is, and we didn't go inside there.
Yeah, we didn't have time to go inside that one.
But people either love it or hate it, just for the outside look, even when the
Yeah,
exhibit's
and
there.
that's
Where do you go in at?
That's in Arles.
No, where do you go into the actual?
Pick a door, any
To the
door,
left.
Tonya.
No, ground level is around to the left. I think we took this from the bus. The
Right.
entrance
Jump,
is to
you
the-
jump to whichever
There's a
door you
regular
feel
level
like.
entrance down to the left.
Yeah.
The entrance is what I meant.
The entrance looks like a
Yeah.
normal entrance.
Oh, gotcha.
In that bottom
Around
level, but
in the
it's
wall,
around the
yeah.
waist.
Keep going.
And
Yeah,
then,
sure.
this is on the bus, we're leaving the river now, we're off our boat, by boat, going over to Nice. So
Nice.
on a stop on the way there was an American cemetery. There was a landing there, as well as the one in Italy, which is more famous, where they thought they were at Italy, but there was a landing there as well. And several of the people buried there are buried before the landing because they were pilots who were killed in this area trying to bomb Germans or whatever earlier than that. So that's the angel looking over the field and all the crosses. Better view of the crosses there. It's just a very beautiful, very peaceful place, and they're always incredibly well manicured. And you can go to German cemeteries and to a lesser extent French ones that just aren't as well kept as this. All the American ones have somebody there all the time, live, and a guide to speak to. They'll do a little wreath laying ceremony like one of your veterans do it.
It was very nice. They're always very respectful, and you always have a very nice little ceremony, just in memory.
The next stop on the way there was for lunch at a winery, so this was literally our lunch.
Yeah.
It's olive
Charcuterie.
tapenade,
Yes, yes.
yep.
It's like the board.
Just like here in Morehead, you see the olives and the cheeses and the meats, and that's black olive tapenade, if I remember right, in the middle.
Yeah.
And you see the Camembert style cheese on the right, the soft cheeses, the seasoned hams there on the left, and so on. So it was a neat lunch. It was so windy though, it was literally blowing the umbrellas
The
off
umbrellas,
the table.
they had to take off one of the umbrellas.
Yeah, that would be
That's like a
dangerous.
mistrial day when we
Yes,
were there.
mistrial. The funny thing is, I had read about this mistrial before we went, and I was thrilled that we got to actually feel it, because it's only a certain part of the year, so. Oh,
Yes.
it's,
Winery.
I thought I heard that.
This is the chateau at the winery, which I think they lease out the bottom level
it's
for
owned
events. and
by
things like
one
that.
family.
They have weddings and stuff there, I wonder.
Yeah, but I think they're so wealthy that they, like this thing here is an art exhibit that was just kind of loaned to them for a
Yeah,
number
for
of
X
years.
amount of time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The
we
winery
didn't-
was not
We
really
didn't
functioning
get
as
to
a
go
winery,
into
we
the
didn't
house
see that.
because they actually live there.
Oh, there are people in
There's people in it, we just got to
Well, I
walk
just
in
went
there.
There's gotta be something to keep it up.
I know.
19 bedrooms or something like that.
That's part of their yard.
Doesn't that really look like a Monet, or for that matter, Van Eyck
Yeah,
painting as
yeah.
you're on the way out? No, that's, there's a
Mm.
photograph. Then we're on the highway getting to Nice. Our guide was from Marseille, so this is where you split and go west to Marseille or go east to Monaco and Nice, what they call the Côte d'Azur. So we took this picture as we came in on the waterfront, looking up the street to, that may actually be our hotel where the blue lettering is.
It
It says
is Splendid,
Yep.
it's Splendid Hotel.
So that's the view up.
That's the name of it, it's the Splendid Hotel.
So it's like 3 long blocks. We're on the promenade, as they call it.
Is that a Remax sign up there?
Probably,
It
yes,
may- it
yes,
may
it
be.
is.
Real estate.
Yeah,
Yes.
The
yes,
real-
it is.
The realty, amazing, the restaurants, logos, realty, the
You'd
companies that
really
are
be
world.
surprised how much crossover there is from America to
American.
there. I mean, in a way, it's almost
Wow.
sad, but there's,
This is one of their city hall buildings, and you see their tram there instead of, but there are buses, but on the main routes you have these trams. And there's never not a tram on this road. It's going one direction or the other, or both. You can get anywhere. If you buy the little ticket that gets you on the subway, we actually took the subway to come down here, then you can ride the tram and everything else too. But it was a nice day for walking, so we walked through the town. And that's one of the main plazas with the sculpture there, when you're in that,
Optical
by that
illusion
orange
street or
building.
something.
Yeah, I know, different, there's a curve in the middle building and a triangle on the right.
No, and then the ground in the foyer.
And here's the famous place, although you don't see the sidewalk so well. This is their beach. You can't quite see it in this picture, but the beach actually, when I was there 45 years ago, is actually 3 or 4 feet below this. But I guess the ocean's been rising, so they filled it. And they filled it with gravel that's not necessarily great. The beach is not sand there. It's these small round stones, which are there on the water still, but they built it up, and you can tell it's built up because the steps go down 3 feet below the beach. You go down steps and then climb back up to the beach, like the steps, hundred years
To
ago.
walk
were to
into the
left.
water, you have to, actually, I had to put my feet in the water, just had to, it was required.
It is.
And walking on those rocks is painful,
Right.
it does not feel good. Jay was helping
have
me
your
so I
water
wouldn't
shoes.
fall, this is funny though, Jay was helping me so I wouldn't fall, so I was going down with bare feet, and the ocean just decided to wash my feet and Jay's feet. So we both got, he had his shoes
Went
on.
up to my shins, and I had dress pants and other shoes on.
great.
I told the women next to us, that's your amusement for me. It's over now.
Yeah, right.
But
I'm not
the
sure why we
ocean,
get so.
I think they were real concerned about losing their beach because the ocean comes in here and then in order to get down, you have to step down to get to the ocean. It's not like a nice smooth beach like this.
It's no
like,
gradual.
You have to.
If you're in it,
step
you're up
down.
at your hips already. 'Cause-
So they're trying to save their ocean, they're trying to save their
beach
beach.
area.
Yeah.
But that's the famous
boardwalk.
Promenade des Anglais.
Yes.
Some English guys built this. The beach is to your left. You're looking back up towards town. And you can see the sidewalk is 4 times as big as the road, and it's just the thing to do is
It's
walk
just a
down the
great
side.
place to walk, that's all it
It's
is.
really pretty.
It's beautiful. We walk down to the market, and that's
Oh,
the
look at
flower
those
market.
This is the market, they have a big outdoor market where everybody, the local folks all buy their food, it's like a big farmer's market. And you can see bread there, all kinds of vegetables, all kinds of meats, all kinds of bread.
Did y'all buy stuff? I know you're on the ship.
Yeah, we did, we borrowed a few things, but we didn't buy too. I think we ate. In this town, I don't know if we've got a picture of him, but we were looking for a place to eat, and I was starved, and we had no clue where to stop. And so we were looking at this menu that was there, and this guy, he said, he saw me looking at it, he and his wife or significant other were sitting out there eating at a table, and he goes, "It's good," or, you know, "It's very good," or something like that. So we went over and sat down by them and ordered. It was really, really good. And he
Said,
said,
okay, what he's having.
he's a local guy who lives on a boat, his boat, and he says, "I come here to eat every day because I really like this
It's
food."
lunch every day, and they're not open for dinner, they're just open for lunch.
Yeah.
It's,
yeah.
if this
And he
isn't it,
knows
it's on the street
everybody.
like this on
He
the
knew
right.
all the people who worked in the it's just a small restaurant, you know, family owned. The chef and his wife were in there, and we went in and said what we, you know, we would like. We weren't sure what we wanted, so they showed us what the special of the day was, and that's what we got.
It was aubergine farci, and I said, aubergine, I get it, it's eggplant, what's farci? And then I figured out later, it meant farsi like the language Farsi, it's a Persian-style eggplant. But she literally showed me what the ingredients were, telling me in French, and I knew half and half, and I wish she showed me, I said, oh, that's gonna be very good. Why would you not get the plat dessert, right? And then it was-
Yeah,
Right.
especially.
But it was on a street like this, I don't think it was this street. Then you see the little flag there, that means there's a tour route nearby. Flag is a tour route. I took these 2 pictures, and you have trouble seeing what it is. I think I have a picture of one of the churches in a minute. 2 churches literally are not 2 football fields apart, just on tiny blocks like this. This is at a very small church, the names of those killed in World War I. You can see how long the list is of the men from just a parents' church, not a big church. Then the next thing we went to was in Nice. And then the next thing we went to was the cathedral, like I say, 200 yards away, facing the same direction. That's their list of the people killed in World War I. I mean, they really thought that was the war that would end all wars and built these wonderful monuments. And then 30 years later, they're in another world war. Now, from the Promenade des Anglais, there's a place that's included with your metro ticket, I guess, because nobody asked for our tickets. There's an elevator that takes you up to the top of the hill, which is 4 or 5 stories above it all. And that's the view looking back toward Nice when you're up at the top of the hill. Again, look, that's maybe looking more towards Monaco. I think there's a little bit of blue you see over there, maybe a harbor on the right. Or is that back toward Nice?
I think that's back to.
That's back toward Nice. And here's the view of the bay.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So that's why it's so famous, the Côte d'Azur, the Blue Coast,
Yeah.
because the color of the water there is so spectacular. Back to the flags on the promenade. Des Anglais, and that was the last thing we saw, because the next morning we took off.
Alright. Well,
Very good.